your worldview refutes itself.
How? Because my worldview is that I presuppose this because I can't account for it.
When you have a chemical state that leads to another chemical state, it doesn't guarantee proper logical inference. Let me finish. Therefore, what it means is your conclusions can't be trusted as being correct.
Wrong.
And
they can be trusted for being correct.
How do you know?
Because I am presupposing it. You don't. If you just keep.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. The video that we're about to watch features a debate between Matt Dilahunty and Matt Slick. This specific portion of the debate was sent to me actually via email from someone in the audience. At the end, you'll see it really comes to a head and a very important point is made. This conversation is basically between secular humanism and theism, I guess you could say, Christianity, theism, in terms of what is the best grounding or foundation for the reliability of the mind and the external reality of truth in the universe. It'll all make sense in a second. Let's dive in.
Your worldview does not include God as part of the equation. Then since there's only two things to work with that we can even talk about, the natural world, which you said we know, and there's nothing that we can use as a method to determine the supernatural, we're left with the natural. So your worldview necessitates the working of the natural.
Yes.
Therefore, I'm working within that. The worldview of the natural has the physics, laws of chemistry, etc. Our brain works on physics, laws of chemistry, etc. How does a physical brain therefore produce proper logical inference if one chemical state loses another chemical state, and that's what our brains are?
So, like I said, there's no guarantee that any particular brain is going to actually reason correctly. And what I will say is that logic is not something that is, or the foundations of thought aren't something that are produced by a brain. They are truths that we recognize. They are the truths that demonstrated by a simple Venn diagram that something is either A or not A. That's it.
You're not answering the question.
Okay, the question is, how can a brain produce logic?
How does a brain restricted to physical laws of chemistry and physics, I'm just going to use motion, matter, chemistry, physics, how does that produce proper logical inference? As you said, which I think is very interesting, is not dependent upon the human brain. I totally agree with you. Well, then that means your brain, my brain are different brains. We can't use your brain or my brain to be the standards of logical inference. We can't. We both agree. We both make mistakes. We're both not perfect in our logical thinking.
What do we point to?
We apply to something else these laws of logic. Now, the issue is
Correct.
the physical brain. Yeah, and they're outside of ourselves.
Correct.
The physical. Oh, there you go.
It's
yes.
that they don't exist as
yes,
things.
yes.
They are not,
they
are not
theism.
contingent upon any individual's thought. They don't exist as a thing.
So my question is, how does the physical brain, where one chemical state relates to another chemical state or changes to one, how does it produce proper logical inference? Does it?
Can it?
Can it?
Yes. Otherwise, we
How would you know?
Because we can recognize it through the logic that we just talked about. So,
wait a minute. If your brain's saying that, and it's all that is of physical chemicals, you can't say that to be true, because you don't know if your brain's saying that is right. You're just saying that.
This is the real issue here, and this is truth. What's the definition of truth according to you?
Well, look. The issue
no, if
here,
you're going to make truth and logic the foundation of it, we ought to get this out.
Truth is that which corresponds to actuality and or logic.
Okay, so we agree on what truth is. And so if truth is what corresponds to actuality and logic, then when a brain reasons, you take the output of that and see if it correlates with logic and with the facts of reality and reason.
But the problem is, if you are in a cage of physical chemical reactions, you cannot ascertain whether or not those conclusions properly relate to the truth.
So the assessment doesn't have to be done solely, which is why science relies on independent affirmation. Now, you can say, and I will agree, at the end of the day, maybe all of us are wrong.
In order to filter 1,000 opinions in, you still have to filter it through your one brain. And so I don't actually know that the point he's making here solves the primary question.
The justification from that worldview, that's the issue. My worldview, I can justify it. Your worldview, you can't. Let's go over it again. A chemical state that leads to another chemical state doesn't produce proper logical inference.
We'll get to whether or not you can justify it, but here's the thing. We have two different worldviews.
Yes.
Okay? And yet you just agreed that we can agree about a logical fallacy.
Of course
which
we can.
demonstrates that I can in fact be correct about a logical fallacy.
Of course you can.
Okay?
That's not the issue.
Okay.
The issue isn't that. Let me try it again. You have one chemical state that leads to another chemical state in the brain. This is your worldview. And yet you're going to say this interaction and this change, I'm going to oversimplify, baking soda and vinegar. That's not an oversimplification, but something we can relate to. There it is, fuzz. Does that produce proper logical inference? Of course not. But if your worldview is comprised of a world of physics and chemistry and motion and matter, then that's what it reduces to. You cannot justify the laws of logic in that worldview.
Okay, no. Why are we talking about whether or not you can justify the laws of logic when I said I presuppose them? When I say I presuppose these, I'm already acknowledging
you're presupposing them.
Yes.
I got that. Let's try it again. Your worldview cannot account for them.
What difference does that make?
Let me finish.
Why would you presuppose something that you can account for? Of course it can't account for it.
I'm trying to say this. Your worldview refutes itself.
How? Because my worldview is that I presuppose this because I can't account for it.
When you have a chemical state that leads to another chemical state, it doesn't guarantee proper logical inference. Now, let me finish. Therefore, what it means is your conclusions can't be trusted as being correct.
Wrong.
And
they can be trusted for being correct.
How do you know?
Because I am presupposing it. You don't. If you just keep.
How can it be?
Wow! It's perfect.
Go.
Here's the thing. Let's go. We'll backtrack a second because the police are coming to haul us away. I acknowledge that I cannot give an account for the logical absolutes. My position is also I don't see how anyone or anybody or anything could account for the logical absolutes. The reason I wanted to ask about truth is because you have in all of your objections here an implication that there must be absolute certainty.
Implication?
Implication. That there must be absolute certainty, which I've already pointed out is not the case, that you can have reasonable positions, probabilistic positions, that don't require absolute certainty, which is why I was asking about the definition of truth. If I say my worldview does not account for this, I'm also willing to say I've never been presented with any explanation from any worldview that could account for this. What I hear is somebody saying, my worldview can account for it because I have an invisible friend who's perfect and can't account for these. Or my worldview can account for this because I have something that I can't demonstrate to be true, which serves as a necessary and sufficient account of this thing. That is just an assertion. It is not a demonstration of truth. It's not a demonstration that your worldview can account for it. Saying you can account for it, don't make it so.
But that would also apply to his entire position here, where he's talking about presuming something. I'm going to save unpacking that for the end of the video because I think there's like another minute here, but just kind of note the double standard.
You are the ones who say we don't have to have absolute certainty. No problem with that. My position is not that. My position is that in this particular subdivision we're talking about, it's self-refuting. You cannot trust your own brain to properly represent actuality. You cannot present a rational reason without presupposing that the laws of logic, that laws of chemistry and physics can produce proper logical inference. This is a problem. It's a serious problem inside of the secular worldview. That's the position, and you're not tackling that particular position. You jump into the area where we both basically agree. Of course you can use logic. And I have an article on my website. Can atheists be ethical? Of course they can be ethical. Can they be logical? You better believe they can. The issue isn't that. In this worldview, where chemical reactions lead to other chemical reactions, you cannot demonstrate that leads to proper logical inference. And if anything, it can be demonstrated that it could lead to something that's not proper logical inference, which means you shouldn't trust a system.
Sure. Where in there did you explain how you can account for those laws of logic? Sure.
I can account for the laws of logic by presupposing that God exists. Okay. Let me finish. Because the laws of logic themselves are abstractions, and they're universal and transcendent, and universal transcendent abstractions imply a universal mind.
The purely secular humanist position cannot stand on its own 2 feet. It must borrow its assumptions from a theistic worldview. Don't stop 1 degree shy of actual explanation. You don't have to do this, Matt Dilahunty. You can actually go just 1 step further, and there is a fountainhead where all of these different things that you're having to just assume without being able to ground, there is a fountainhead where they all flow from, which is the nature of God himself, where suddenly beauty is explained. Love is explained. The very nature of human consciousness is explained. The universal constants are explained. The fact that we all sense that there's meaning to our lives is explained. The fact that we have eternity in our hearts is explained. And I could go on and on. There's hundreds of these things that without God, you simply have to accept as just unexplainable facts of reality. But with God, you can actually offer a unifying explanation of them. If there is a God, if there is a creator, if there is then there is intention behind everything. And it would make sense that these different, seemingly disparate components of reality would actually, again, find their source in I am himself, God. And so obviously this is just a stepping stone. This is just a beginning point. This is a little bit more philosophical than we typically go on this channel. But I do think that this is a useful conversation and that it really does highlight the completely self-refuting nature of the secular humanist worldview when it comes to the reliability of the human mind and the very concept of truth itself. With that being said, I hope you guys like this video and I'll see you in the next one.